A billionaire finally slept, after a decade of insomnia. But when he opened his eyes, she was gone, and so was the truth. Who was the woman who disappeared without a name, leaving behind only a scent and a bracelet? Why did another woman claim credit for a night she never lived? And what really caused the explosion that turned a groundbreaking invention into a public catastrophe? Was it sabotage, a mistake, or revenge? When a quiet janitor becomes the only person who can calm the most powerful man in biotech, and when that same man starts to question everything he remembers, the truth begins to unravel, and it doesn't care who gets destroyed along the way. What secret was she hiding when she whispered, "It was me"? And what did she mean when she added, "I'm pregnant"? This story is full of shadows, power, lies, betrayal. But somewhere in the wreckage, there might still be something worth saving. If you're ready for a story that will pull you in and keep you guessing, hit like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Let's step into the mystery. Let's begin. In the center of Seattle, where the lights from the high-rises flicker like stars trapped on Earth, stands a tower of polished steel and glass. At its peak sits Well Biotech, a sanctuary of science and ambition, and inside its highest floor lives a man drowning in both. Ethan Carter, 41 years old, is the kind of person who seems carved from calm stone, precise, untouchable, always composed. People say he was born to lead. But what they do not see, what he hides behind tailored suits and boardroom charm, is the slow unraveling that happens when you have not slept in years. No remedy could touch it, no therapy, no herbal tea, not even silence, night after night. Ethan lay in bed with his eyes wide open, staring at ceilings and shadows. His insomnia was not just a condition, it was a prison. And then, one evening in late autumn, that began to change. It was Well's founding anniversary, 15 years to the day. The celebration was nothing short of extravagant laughter echoing from the ballroom, champagne bubbles rising like golden fireflies. Ethan was expected to speak, to shine. Instead, he slipped away from his own image. Just for one night. The music swelled, the room spun. The weight of exhaustion finally cracked through his armor. By the time the crowd thinned, Ethan was a shadow of himself, loosened tie, unsteady steps, words that came out soft and scattered. Meanwhile, on the lower floors, Lena Morgan worked her usual night shift. She was 27, quiet and quick with her hands. No one noticed her much, just the girl with the mop and headphones, the one who hummed when she cleaned. That night, as she was collecting empty glasses and wiping away other people's footprints, she spotted him, the man from the posters, her boss, barely standing. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then moved. He looked at her as if she were both unfamiliar and familiar all at once. She said nothing, only offered her arm. He leaned on her like he might fall without it. And together, they rode the silent elevator to the top floor. His office was dimly lit, the city stretching out behind the glass like a silent witness. He lowered himself onto the leather couch without grace. As she turned to leave, he spoke just one word: stay. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was something neither of them could name. He reached for a bottle tucked away on the shelf, poured amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses, and handed her one. Her fingers brushed his. She almost left again, but didn't. They drank. They talked. Softly, strangely. Then, when the clock had long forgotten the hour, something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile. Something neither of them planned. On that cold leather couch, their lives collided in a way no blueprint ever could. Ethan slept. For the first time in nearly a decade, his mind gave in to rest. No dreams, no edge, just stillness. Lena woke just before dawn. Her heart pounded in her chest like it was trying to outrun the sun. She gathered her things in silence, her breath tight in her throat, and as she turned to go, she didn't notice the bracelet slipping from her wrist, a thin silver chain with a tiny leaf charm, a gift from her mother long ago. Ethan stirred hours later, alone, dazed, but calm. He sat up, eyes blinking against the morning haze. Something felt different, lighter. And then he noticed it, that faint fragrance in the air. Soft, warm, with notes of sandalwood and something gently floral. It wrapped around him like a memory he could not quite place. Then he found it. The bracelet lay half-tucked between the cushions, delicate and cool to the touch. He picked it up, held it like it meant something because it did. It was real. She was real. He didn't know her name, couldn't recall her face. But for one impossible night, he had known peace. Now, he needed to find her. But life rarely lets secrets sleep for long. The morning after that unspoken night, Sabrina Knox Nova Wells, poised and ambitious operations director, steps into Ethan Carter's office with a stack of polished reports and a perfectly rehearsed smile. She doesn't expect to see him standing still, staring at something small and silver resting on his desk. He doesn't even look up as she enters. His voice is low, almost distant, as he murmurs about her, the woman, the scent, the night that gave him rest. Sabrina follows his gaze. There it is, a fragile bracelet, its charm catching the morning light like a whisper. And in that moment, she sees not just jewelry but possibility. She picks it up slowly, her fingers grazing the cool metal, and when Ethan glances at her and quietly asks, "Is this yours?" she hesitates, just for a breath. Then she nods. She doesn't correct him. Why should she? If Ethan believes she was the one who brought him peace, who helped him sleep when no remedy ever could, then that lie might be her golden ladder, to more than status, to influence, to his heart. And so, the story begins to bend. Ethan, now holding on to nothing but a fragment of memory and a misplaced bracelet, is driven by a quiet urgency. He needs to find the woman from that night, not because of what happened between them, but because of what it did to him. For the first time in nearly 10 years, he felt human again, whole, and that's not something he's willing to let fade. Across the building, Lena Morgan does everything she can to stay invisible. She scrubs tiles that gleam too brightly and avoids every reflective surface. Her hands ache, her back throbs, but it's her thoughts that punish her most. She replays the night in loops, how she helped him, how she stayed, how she should have run sooner. Now, all she wants is silence, to disappear, to pretend it never happened. But fate has other ideas. Sabrina begins weaving her narrative with delicate precision. Every nod, every word, every glance is calculated. When Ethan shares fragments of what he remembers, the drink, the couch, the calming scent, she smiles with just enough mystery to keep his hope alive, inside. Her thoughts are already 2 steps ahead. She cannot afford missteps, especially not now. So before anyone else can speak, before truth has a chance to rise, she moves to erase it. By early morning, the security footage from the gala night, the one that might have shown Lena helping a drunk, unsteady CEO through the corridors, is gone. Sabrina made sure of it. The system logs are wiped. No trace remains. No questions will be asked. Back in the basement, Lena plunges her hands into soapy water, scrubbing floors and trying to rinse guilt from her skin. But memory is stubborn. She can't shake the way he looked at her, how his guard slipped, how she let herself stay. She doesn't know that someone else now wears her memory like a crown. She doesn't know the lie has already begun. Lena Morgan had already been stretched thin, working long shifts just to afford a one-bedroom apartment where the heater rattled louder than it warmed, and a mother back home in Spokane who still believed her daughter was chasing dreams, not just surviving. The last thing she needed was the memory of him. Every time she closed her eyes, the night returned like static under her skin. She couldn't afford the risk. If Ethan Carter ever found out who had truly been with him that night, she was finished. Men like him didn't forgive mistakes, they erased them. So Lena did what she always did, kept her head down, stayed quiet, blended into corners. She became invisible again, or so she hoped, but fate has a curious sense of timing. It was a gray Tuesday, one of those days when the sky never fully woke. She was asked to clean the executive floor, including the one office she had hoped never to enter again. As the elevator doors slid open, she muttered a quiet prayer. Please let him be gone. But there he was, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed, surrounded by papers and parts of something sleek and unfinished on his desk. She paused, eyes lowered, offered a quick apology and turned to leave. But Ethan's voice stopped her. He gestured to the small device before him, Nova Well's latest prototype, a scent-based air filter designed to calm the nervous system. It's not working, he said with frustration, as if expecting it to breathe peace into the air and getting only silence. Lena stood frozen. She wasn't an inventor. She barely finished community college, but she did know scent. It had been her shelter growing up, blending oils and herbs to drown out the screaming in her father's kitchen, masking pain with lavender and pine. Her voice came out before she could stop it. Maybe something woody, she suggested, barely above a whisper. To ground the bass, sandalwood works. Sometimes. He looked at her, surprised. Then, slowly, he handed her the prototype. With trembling fingers, she reached into her cleaning cart and took out a small vial, a mix she used for stubborn hallway smells. A single drop slipped into the chamber. The device hummed, then bloomed into a scent that wrapped around the room like warmth. Familiar. Steady. Ethan froze. It hit him like thunder under his ribs. That scent. It was her. His eyes searched her face, suddenly unsure of every conclusion he had made. Lena stood still, heart racing. She could feel the recognition dawning in his gaze. "Where did you get that blend?" he asked. She blinked fast, voice tight. "It's just something I use for work. Nothing special." Then she grabbed her mop and all but fled the room. But Ethan had already begun to see the cracks in the story Sabrina had spun. And now, a new seed had been planted. Downstairs, Sabrina Knox caught wind of what had happened. A casual comment in the break room. That new girl's been cleaning the top floor again. It was enough. Her instincts sharpened. She wasn't about to let some faceless janitor unravel the lie she had so carefully built. So she pulled strings, quietly, ruthlessly. Lena's shift hours were extended. Her tasks became heavier, dirtier. Nighttime trash runs, chemical scrubs, stairwell grout. Sabrina told the custodial manager it was a disciplinary test, a performance issue, but it was punishment, plain and simple. Lena said nothing. She was used to this kind of fight. People always assumed quiet meant weak. But what no one noticed except one person was that she didn't stop. And Ethan Carter noticed everything. It was late after 10 when he caught sight of her again. She was kneeling beside a broken vacuum, wrestling with the wiring, her sleeves soaked, hair falling loose. He watched for a while before stepping closer. "Need a hand?" he asked. She startled, then forced a smile, brushing a strand from her face. "No, sir. Just part of the job." He liked that about her, the way she didn't flinch, didn't flatter, just did what had to be done. And as the days passed, the image of Sabrina Knox in a designer suit blurred against the memory of Lena Morgan, kneeling beside broken machines and fixing more than just hardware. The bracelet, the scent, the gaps in his memory, they no longer aligned. Sleep began to elude him again, but not from restlessness. This time it was curiosity, the nagging sense of something almost remembered. One evening, he found Lena in the lobby, clocking out for the night. Her face was tired, but her eyes still fierce. He approached her slowly. "I've been thinking about that night," he said, voice steady, "about the woman, and what happened. I feel like I owe her something. An apology, at the very least." Lena's breath caught in her throat. He didn't know. Not yet. But he was getting close, and her quiet life was about to be anything but quiet. That evening, as the autumn air settled heavy over Seattle, Ethan Carter did something out of character. He made an offer that wasn't quite a request. "I have a guest room at my place," he said. His voice was gentle, but the weight beneath it was unmistakable. "You should stay there, just until we figure this out." His tone left little room for refusal. Not harsh, just certain. The kind of certainty that comes from a man used to being obeyed. Lena Morgan felt her stomach twist. Live in the home of the man whose name was on her paychecks, the same man whose world she didn't belong to, whose memory she might be part of. She wanted to say no. She should have. But then she looked at him. And there, beneath the authority, she saw something else, fatigue so deep it felt like grief, and maybe a flicker of something softer. Hope. Maybe. Or loneliness. She thought of her apartment, a cracked ceiling, thin walls, cold mornings, and her bank balance, barely breathing. So she nodded, not because she trusted him, not because she was sure, but because something told her this was where the next chapter began, whether she was ready or not. From a few floors up, behind spotless glass and curated orchids, Sabrina Knox watched them leave together. Her nails pressed into her palms, a silent imprint of rising fury. She had underestimated the girl with the mop. That would not happen again. She would not let this slip through her hands. Not after all she had planned. Not after everything she had faked to be the woman Ethan wanted. Lena had just stepped into a world where power whispers behind smiles and where love and lies look the same in candlelight. Ethan's townhouse in the Westlake district was nothing short of a dream, floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed beams, soft jazz humming through hidden speakers. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a magazine spread. Lena stood in the entryway, clutching her thrifted duffel bag like armor. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floor. He showed her to a room that was brighter, larger, and far quieter than any place she had ever called hers. He was casual about it, as though this were nothing unusual. But Lena's mind reeled. She told herself it was temporary, just until it all blew over, just until she figured out how to disappear again. But somewhere deep down, she feared this might become something else, something harder to leave. In the following days, Ethan surprised her. Yes, he was still the man behind Novawell, the man who spoke in numbers and timelines, who wore silence like a second suit. But at home, he unraveled slowly. One morning, she caught him staring helplessly at the espresso machine in the kitchen. She reached over, pressed 2 buttons, and handed him the steaming cup. He laughed, a quiet, genuine sound. And that laugh stayed with her longer than the smell of the coffee. Their conversations began in pieces about weather, the neighborhood, how she drank her coffee black because milk cost extra. But as night folded into night, takeout boxes filled their table, and words spilled easier, he listened, really listened, when she talked about nothing, about cleaning tricks, about her favorite music to mop to, and she watched him, this tired man with sleepless eyes, become someone gentler, someone warmer. He still couldn't quite place the truth. But every time she passed, every time she cooked or cleaned or simply was, the scent followed, that soft trail of sandalwood and something sweeter. It haunted him, it healed him, and sleep returned, slowly. Not every night, but often enough that he started to believe in it again. One evening, they sat on the rooftop terrace, wrapped in jackets against the chill, looking out at the city lights shimmering on Lake Union. He turned to her and asked, not gently, but honestly, "Tell me about your life, not the surface, the truth." She hesitated, then spoke. She told him about growing up in the South End. Not the side with cafes and murals, but the side where the police sirens were more regular than rain. Her mother had worked triple shifts at a diner, always coming home with blistered hands and stale coffee on her coat. Her father, when he was there, drank more than he spoke. And when he spoke, it often hurt. So she learned to be small, to vanish in plain sight. But in that noise, she found stillness in sense. Her mother brought home leftover herbs from the diner. Lena would mix them in jars, pairing basil with cedar, chamomile with clove. She called them calm bottles. They were her way out when the walls shook. She never told anyone that before. When she finished, Ethan said nothing for a long while, just looked at her like he was seeing something rare. Then he whispered, more to himself than to her, "You're the strongest person I've ever met." It was the first time she felt truly seen, and it terrified her more than anything. She called them her bottles of calm little glass vials filled with oil blends she'd learned to make in her mother's cramped kitchen, while the world outside their thin apartment walls screamed and shook. Lena Morgan would mix lavender with clove, sandalwood with citrus, anything to carve out a moment of peace. Those scents became her safety net, her small rebellion against chaos, her way to breathe. As they sat together on the rooftop terrace that night, her story spilled out not as a confession, but as truth gently laid bare. She spoke of a dream she once had to open a tiny shop that sold fragrances meant not just to smell good, but to heal. A place that smelled like safety, like softness. But life hadn't been kind to dreamers like her. Every step forward had come with a price: rent, guilt, reality. She wasn't looking for sympathy. But when she fell silent, Ethan Carter didn't fill the space with praise or pity. He simply looked at her, quiet, steady. And then he said, almost to himself, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." She had been seen before by passing glances, suspicious bosses, strangers in grocery lines. But this felt different. He had seen her, and it rattled her more than any spotlight ever could. Back at Novawell, things were stirring in the shadows. From her corner office lined with sharp lines and colder intentions, Sabrina Knox watched and fumed. She had watched Ethan and Lena leave together, had seen the way his eyes followed her when he thought no one noticed. And for someone like Sabrina, who had polished herself into perfection, who had clawed her way through every closed door, it was unbearable. She wasn't just jealous, she was angry. Angry that after all her planning, her positioning, her lies, it was Lena Morgan, the janitor with soft hands and quiet confidence, who now stood beside Ethan. But Sabrina wasn't alone. She had already aligned herself with Catherine Lowell. Ethan's stepmother, a woman with a porcelain smile and a heart carved from ice. Catherine had never forgiven Ethan for taking over after his father's death. She had always believed her son, Aiden, deserved that chair. Now, with Sabrina feeding her ambition, the two women began to move. It started as whispers, subtle suggestions slipped into boardroom corridors, that Ethan was distracted, that his relationship with Sabrina blurred the lines, that perhaps he was slipping. It was poison in slow motion, and it began to work. Meanwhile, Ethan had something else on his mind. He remembered how Lena had fixed the malfunctioning prototype weeks ago. How she'd known, with eerie precision, what scent it needed to settle into balance. And now, as Novawell prepared to launch its long-awaited wellness device, a sleek machine that promised calm through aroma, he wanted Lena's hands on the formula. She resisted at first. "I'm not a scientist," she said. "I clean floors, that's all." But Ethan refused to accept that version of her. So he carved out a quiet corner in the lab, just a small table, a shelf of base oils, a few tools, and told her, "Try." She did. Lavender, cedarwood, sandalwood. Of course. But with her own intuition guiding her hands, she added softness notes of bergamot, a trace of rosewood. The scent that emerged was peace, bottled. When Ethan tested the blend in his office, the room transformed. Not just the air, but the energy. It brought him back to that night, to the feeling that had haunted him since. He told her they were using it, that this was the one, that her formula would be the centerpiece of the launch. Lena stood speechless. She had never been part of something that mattered, never been asked to create. And now, something she made might change lives. But across the hallway, behind her high heels and higher ambition, Sabrina watched. This was the final straw. She couldn't stand the sight of Lena becoming more than a footnote. She still had access to the lab. She had connections, authority. So one night, long after most of the staff had gone home, Sabrina returned. She wore gloves. She moved quietly, and she opened the prototype Lena had worked on with such care. From a shelf in the chemical storage, she selected a compound volatile, subtle, nearly undetectable once mixed. She added it to the machine's core, just enough to cause damage, just enough to make it look like a design flaw. She even skipped the final safety test herself, signed it off, said it was complete. It was sabotage, but Sabrina didn't care. If the launch failed, Ethan would fall. The board would panic, Catherine would slide Aiden into place, and Lena, poor, naive Lena, would be blamed for everything. It was a fire waiting to happen. But for now, Ethan and Lena had no idea. They were too busy building something neither of them could name. He took her to small places, diners tucked into corners, food trucks that served dumplings wrapped in steam. They walked along quiet streets, sharing stories and silence. She taught him how to make eggs without burning the pan. He told her about his father, how he built Novawell from nothing, how grief had turned into insomnia, how he'd spent years chasing a night of rest he thought would never return. And Lena listened, not because he was important, but because he wasn't pretending. And for a man who had everything, that meant more than he knew. He had laughed too hard when she burnt the eggs. Ethan Carter, the man once made of marble and silence, now stood barefoot in his own kitchen, rubbing at a flour stain on his shirt while the pan smoked quietly behind him. But what mattered wasn't the breakfast. It was the way he looked at Lena Morgan while telling her things he had never said aloud. How his father had started Novawell from scratch. How the man had passed suddenly from a stroke when Ethan was barely 30. How the weight of carrying his father's name, his legacy, had never left his shoulders. That was when the sleepless nights began. Lena listened, not with pity, but presence. She didn't try to fix him. She just reached across the counter, rested her hand lightly on his, and let the silence settle like comfort between them. These were the moments that changed things. Not grand gestures, just honesty, gently given. Ethan still wasn't certain what Lena was to him, not yet. The shadows of Sabrina Knox's lies still clung to the corners of his mind. But every hour with Lena made those shadows shrink. The launch was only days away, now a milestone Novawell had been building toward for over a year. Their newest innovation, the Wellnest Air, was set to debut at the Seattle Innovation Forum, held in the city's largest conference center. Lena's formula was the heart of it. The scent she'd created, grounded in sandalwood, lifted with lavender, threaded with cedar, wasn't just pleasant. It soothed. It healed. It worked. But she wasn't ready for the spotlight. The thought of standing backstage, waiting for her creation to be unveiled to hundreds of industry giants, made her stomach twist. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wore a borrowed blazer Ethan had insisted. It hung slightly off her shoulders, the fabric too fine, too foreign. Her fingers fidgeted at the hem while the sleek silver device was wheeled on stage under warm lights. Ethan stood beside her, steady as ever. He gave her a small nod. She tried to return it, but her nerves made her knees feel unsteady. Still, she stood, because he believed in her. The lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. Ethan stepped forward, confident, clear, commanding. He spoke of transformation, of innovation rooted in humanity, of how scent could become medicine, how calm could be cultivated. And then, in front of everyone, he turned to Lena. "She is the reason this product is what it is," he said. "She is its pulse." A soft applause rose, some polite, some intrigued. Lena flushed, lowering her eyes, wishing the floor might kindly open. In the front row, Sabrina Knox crossed her legs slowly, lips painted in the perfect mask of calm. Just behind her, Catherine Lowell, with her icy pearls and tight jaw, watched like a predator waiting for the trap to spring. Because it was a trap. They had already set it. The device on stage, the one powered by Lena's scent profile, had been compromised. Sabrina had slipped a volatile compound into its inner chamber, bypassing the last round of safety protocols and logging it as tested. All it would take was a surge of heat. A spark. And the dream Lena had built would explode before her eyes. Sabrina's plan was simple blame, the failure on Ethan's recklessness. Say his judgment was clouded. Paint Lena as an unqualified liability. The board would panic. Catherine would make her move. Her son, Aiden, would be positioned to replace Ethan. Lena. Just another crushed name in the company's forgotten corners. Back on stage. Ethan pressed the start button. The machine hummed, then purred, then released the first wave of scent, soft, rich, clean. The room filled with warmth. Heads turned. Nods. Whispers. A few smiles. For a moment, it was perfect. Until it wasn't. A faint hiss came from within the casing. Then, a flicker barely visible, like a breath of flame curling where it should not. Time slowed. Ethan's eyes snapped to the machine. Lena inhaled sharply. And then the machine did not hum this time. It erupted. A violent burst of flame tore through the air, shattering the front panel of the Wellness device. Screams rang out as shattered glass rained onto the stage. Thick, acrid smoke swallowed the calming fragrance it was supposed to release, turning peace into panic. Lena Morgan stood frozen. Her breath caught in her throat. This was her machine, her formula, and it was breaking apart in front of everyone. Before she could move, Ethan Carter reached for her arm, his instincts faster than fear. Run. But they didn't get far. A second explosion knocked them both off their feet. Metal ripped through the air like shrapnel. A sharp edge caught Ethan's shoulder. He twisted mid-fall, throwing himself in front of Lena, shielding her body with his own. He hit the ground hard. Lena landed beside him, coughing, eyes stinging, ears ringing with the chaos around her. She turned to him, and her blood went cold. He wasn't moving. Blood was seeping into his shirt, dark and spreading. His eyes were closed. His face was pale. Still. No. No, no, no. She crawled to him through smoke and shards, her hands trembling. Her voice cracked as she shook him, called his name, begged him to wake up. Nothing. The panic broke something open inside her. The words came spilling out truths she had buried deep. It was me, she whispered. That night. The gala. The couch. The scent. The bracelet. It was all me. I was scared to tell you. Scared you'd hate me. Scared you'd send me away. Her voice broke into sobs. But you have to know something else. I'm pregnant. It was barely more than a breath in the smoke and sirens. But it was real, raw, unpolished. And it was everything she had left. Hours blurred into sterile white light. Ethan was rushed to the hospital, unconscious but alive. Lena never left the waiting room. Her blazer was torn, her hands streaked with dried blood, her throat hoarse from smoke and screaming. She couldn't sit still, couldn't stop blaming herself. It was my formula, my mistake, my fault. She didn't know about Sabrina Knox. Didn't know she'd been set up. Didn't know the damage had been planted long before she ever touched the machine. She was about to disappear again, just like she always had when the sliding doors opened and in walked someone she never expected. Aiden Carter, Ethan's younger brother. Tousled hair, sneakers instead of dress shoes, and a calmness that didn't quite match the situation. He looked at her with something almost like kindness. "You're Lena," he said. "I've been looking for you." He sat beside her, leaned forward, and pulled a laptop from his bag. "I don't play games like my stepmother, or Sabrina, but I know one when I see it." He explained, after the explosion, he'd gone digging into security logs, archived files, digital footprints Sabrina thought she'd erased. He found remnants of the deleted gala footage. Not full, but enough to prove she had tampered with the evidence. Enough to show someone else had taken Ethan to his office that night, and it hadn't been Sabrina. Then he checked the lab system. Sabrina had logged in after hours, accessed the prototype, left no trace of safety testing. It all lined up. "She's behind this," Aiden said simply, "and I'm not letting her get away with it." Later that night, Ethan stirred. He opened his eyes slowly, the hospital lights soft and buzzing. His shoulder was bandaged, his body ached, his thoughts were foggy, but through it all, he heard her voice, faint, trembling, telling the truth he hadn't dared hope for. It was her. It had always been her. He turned his head, saw her sitting beside the bed, pale, eyes red, shoulders curled in on themselves. Their eyes met, and the question left his lips like breath. Is it real? The night, the baby, all of it. Lena nodded, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "For hiding, for being scared, for not telling you." Ethan didn't flinch. He reached out weak, but sure, and found her hand. "I'm glad it's you," he whispered. "I've been chasing you without knowing it." Aiden stepped forward, holding up the laptop. "We've got bigger problems," he said, his usual grin touched with steel. "Vanessa's sabotage, Catherine's plan. It's all on here." Ethan listened, his jaw clenched, but he wasn't surprised. He had always known the wolves would come eventually. He just hadn't known they'd come this close. "Then we finish it," he said. And the three of them stood together, bruised, scared, but unbroken. Back at Nova Well, the boardroom lights were cold and unforgiving. Sabrina sat at the head of the table like she owned the place. Catherine beside her, fingers laced in feigned elegance. They were waiting for Ethan to be wheeled out, for his legacy to collapse under the weight of failure. But when the doors opened, he walked in bandaged. Yes, slower, yes, but standing. At his side, Lena, and just behind them Aiden, holding truth in his hands. In the boardroom of Novawell, silence reigned. The air was thick, not with smoke, but with revelation. On the large projection screen, Aiden Carter clicked through the damning evidence one slide at a time. Each image landed like a blow. Security logs showing Sabrina Knox's unauthorized lab entry at 2:15 in the morning. Traces of the flammable compound pulled from the wreckage of the exploded prototype. A partial recovery of deleted gala footage enough to prove the woman who stayed with Ethan that night wasn't Sabrina. The board of directors, once skeptical, now stunned, sat frozen in their chairs. Sabrina broke first. She stood abruptly, her voice sharp. "This is a setup," she snapped. "A smear campaign. You're all just protecting him because he's the Carter Golden Boy." But Aiden didn't blink. He stepped forward, calm but unshakable. "I'm not here to protect Ethan," he said. "I'm here because I'm done being quiet." Then he dropped the truth he'd been holding in his chest for years. "I'm not interested in being CEO. I never was. I'm gay. I don't want to be anyone's puppet, not Dorothy's, not the board's. And I stand with my brother." Gasps rippled across the room. At the end of the table, Catherine Lowell's mask slipped. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her plan, years in the making, was unraveling before her eyes. Sabrina's polished veneer cracked. Rage flashed in her eyes. That's when Ethan Carter stepped forward. His suit was simple, his movements slower than usual. He was still healing. But his voice, when it came, was firm, real. "You lied," he said to Sabrina. "You used my name, my trust, and almost destroyed someone who gave everything to this project. You're done here." The room held its breath. And the police. They're on their way. Sabrina's lips trembled. She opened her mouth again, but there was no saving herself. Not now. She stormed out. Catherine followed silent, spine straight, but her empire crumbling behind her. Ethan didn't turn back to the board. He turned to Lena Morgan, in front of everyone. He looked at her, not like a man trying to prove a point, but like someone who had finally found what he didn't know he needed. "It's not about the machine," he said. "It's not even about that night. It's you." He wasn't poetic, wasn't rehearsed, just honest. Lena's tears rose again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from relief, and something deeper. The room filled with murmurs, shifting energy, whispered realizations. But Ethan didn't hear any of it. He had what mattered. Still, there was one more promise to keep. A week later, under the golden chandeliers of the Novawell Gala, the city's elite gathered again, this time not for redemption, but resolution. The ballroom shimmered, strings played in the background. Waiters moved with grace between guests holding crystal glasses. But tension lingered like perfume. Whispers curled through every corner. Would Ethan step down? Was it true he'd caused the explosion? Was the janitor still living in his home? Ethan entered slowly, arm still stiff, shoulder still wrapped under his suit. Lena was beside him. No borrowed blazer this time. She wore a soft navy dress she'd chosen herself, modest, but radiant, her arm looped through his, her eyes scanning the crowd. He squeezed her hand once. "You're not here alone," it said, across the room. Sabrina, still uninvited but ever defiant, stood in the center like a wound refusing to close. She'd been spreading her own version of the story. Ethan panicked, blamed her to save himself. The girl beside him, a distraction, an illusion. Catherine backed her, always had. And tonight, they were pushing for a final vote, to strip Ethan of the CEO title, to place Aiden, willing or not, into the chair. What they didn't expect was Ethan stepping onto the stage before the board could speak. No speech, no paper, just truth. He began with the failure. "Yes, the explosion happened on my watch," he said, "and yes, that falls on me. But it didn't happen because of me." Behind him, The screen lit up again. Evidence, footage, timestamps, everything Aiden had uncovered. The truth, laid bare under crystal light. Whispers turned into quiet disbelief. Then Sabrina stood. "This is desperation," she hissed. "You're trying to rewrite the narrative. You failed. You let a mistake happen because you were too busy falling for a fantasy." "And what does that make you?" Ethan asked. "A fantasy built on lies." Catherine rose, backing her. "This company needs real leadership. Steady hands, not emotion, not recklessness." A few heads nodded. But then Aiden Carter walked up, drink in hand, calm smile in place, and steel in his voice. Aiden Carter stepped up to the microphone like it was just another conversation. He took a sip from the glass in his hand, then looked out at the crowd. Board members, investors, old family allies turned quiet enemies. His tone was calm, but his eyes burned. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. "I have never wanted to run Nova well. Not once. And if my mother thinks she can use me to replace my brother, she's living in a world I don't belong to." The murmurs swelled, shocked at his boldness, but Aiden wasn't finished. "I'm gay. I've always been. And I won't let anyone, especially family, use my life as leverage to stab Ethan in the back." He pulled out a small folder and held it up. "Now, let's talk about what matters." I pulled financial records, real ones, not projections, not budgets. I traced offshore accounts connected to Catherine Lowell, dates, amounts, transfers. This has been going on for years. She's been bleeding Nova well dry. Gasps cracked the silence. Catherine's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She reached for her composure and found none. At her side, Sabrina Knox's sharp smile faltered, then it vanished entirely. Aiden turned back to Ethan and handed him the mic. Ethan's voice, when it came, was steady but worn. He wasn't here to gloat. He was just done hiding. "Sabrina sabotaged the machine," he said plainly. "Catherine's been stealing from the company, and they're both finished." He gestured to the security team at the back of the room. "Take them out of the building. No theatrics, no drama, just justice." Sabrina protested loud, shrill, clinging to lies that no longer held weight. But no one reached for her, no one stood in her way. She was dragged from the ballroom, still shouting. Catherine tried to slip out quietly, but the board stopped her, demanding answers she didn't have. She would face her reckoning, not just in this room but in courtrooms that followed, and in the middle of it all. Ethan turned not to the crowd, not to the cameras, but to Lena. She stood near the edge of the stage, small and quiet, hands folded against her stomach. "This woman," he said, "is the one who brought Nova well its future. She didn't just save the machine, she saved me. Again and again." His eyes softened. "And I'm not just grateful. I'm in love with her." The room froze. "She's my peace, my home, my reason to fight." He reached out a hand. "And she's going to be my wife, if she'll have me." Lena's world blurred. She couldn't speak, only nod. Tearfully, shakily. And Ethan crossed the stage and kissed her, not perfectly, not performatively, but honestly. The room erupted in applause, half in shock, half in joy. It didn't matter. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was standing beside him, seen, loved, chosen, for the first time in her life. Lena Morgan felt like enough. A week later, they left the city behind, just the two of them. Ethan drove upstate to a quiet plot of land, a sprawling farm tucked between rolling hills and golden light. He parked the car, stepped out, and took her hand. "It's yours," he whispered. "The whole thing. Acres and acres. For herbs, for flowers, for whatever you want to grow." Lena blinked at him, stunned. "Why?" he smiled softly. Because you're my stillness. And I want to give you a life that smells like hope. He dropped to one knee, the autumn grass brushing his jeans. In his hand was a ring not grand, not flashy, just a slim silver band, inlaid with a thin line of sandalwood, a quiet echo of how it all began. Lena laughed, then cried, then said yes, again. They kissed in the open air, the wind dancing around them, carrying the scent that had started everything. Later, as the sun slipped behind the hills in hues of orange and peach, they sat together, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently over her growing belly. He spoke of the future, not just Nova Well, but them, a family. He said, big, loud, messy, beautiful. Lena smirked. You ready for diapers and tantrums? I'm ready for all of it, he replied, without pause. And in that moment, beneath the sky, surrounded by earth, wrapped in scent and warmth and truth, she believed him. They had survived the fire, the lies, the betrayal, and now together they would bloom. The land stretches endlessly before them. Green fields bathed in golden light, a quiet hum of wind weaving through the trees. And in the center of it all, Lena Morgan, no longer running, no longer hiding. She's building something now, with Ethan Carter at her side. The screen fades to a soft hue, but it's not hard to imagine what comes next. Years from now, a warm, lived-in house filled with laughter and tiny footsteps, machines quietly releasing fragrances she's crafted by hand, and Ethan, still watching her like she's the only thing in the world that makes sense. Their road won't always be smooth, but they've already outrun the impossible. It began with one night neither of them planned. One scent. A whisper of sandalwood and something unspoken that pulled two broken souls together and somehow turned into forever. A CEO and a janitor, but titles never really mattered. They were just two people who found something real in a place no one expected. And that, dear listener, is the end of Ethan and Lena's wild, beautiful ride. From late-night floors and borrowed uniforms to boardroom battles and a love that refused to be silenced, Lena Morgan stepped out of the shadows and changed everything. All it took was a haze of whiskey, a spark of kindness, and that one unforgettable fragrance that lingered long after the night had ended. They faced fire literally, sabotage, betrayal, power plays that could have crushed them both, but instead, they walked through it hand in hand, stronger, steadier. Ethan, the man who once forgot what rest felt like, finally found peace in her arms. And Lena, the girl who had spent her whole life shrinking into silence, stood tall beside him, seen, heard, loved. This isn't just a story about romance. It's a story about courage, the kind that grows in the quiet. About what it means to risk everything for something that feels like home. I still can't shake that image, the two of them standing in the middle of a field, sunset, painting the sky in soft orange and rose, her dress catching in the wind, his voice steady as he placed that simple ring, one with a band of sandalwood, on her finger. And later, the way she laid her head on his shoulder, the baby gently kicking between them, as if to say, I'm here too. They didn't just find each other. They built a future. A home full of color and noise, of diapers and spilled juice and morning coffee brewing with hope. They proved what we all want to believe deep down, that love doesn't care where you come from. It only cares where you're willing to go. So, now that we've reached the end, I want to hear from you. Which moment grabbed your heart? Was it the explosion? That split second when you thought Ethan was gone? Or maybe it was Aiden standing tall, dropping the truth with a grin and finally walking his own path? Or was it that quiet, powerful moment in the hospital, when Lena confessed everything, not knowing if he'd ever open his eyes? For me, it was the proposal. No flash, no crowd, just a man, a woman, a field and the scent of sandalwood wrapping around them like a memory that never left. Whatever it was for you, drop it in the comments. I read them all, every word. Because these stories, they're not just mine, they're ours. If this one made you feel something, if it brought you to tears, made you laugh, or just left you sitting quietly with a soft smile, let me know. And if you're new here, welcome. This is what we do. We tell stories that go to the deep places, that crack you open and remind you what love really looks like. So tap that subscribe button, ring the bell, and stick around, because there's always another story waiting to be told. This was Ethan and Lena's story, a tale of scent, survival, and a love that bloomed where no one was looking. Thank you for walking through it with me. You've been here the whole way through the sparks, the storms, and the sunrise, and I just want you to know, this isn't the end. I've got more stories coming, more tales of strangers becoming soulmates, of people finding one another in the middle of life's noise and chaos, stories like Ethan and Lena, where love doesn't walk in with a grand entrance, but slips through the cracks and makes a home there. So stay close. All right, tell me what moved you. What made you laugh? What made you hold your breath? Maybe next time it'll be a quiet baker from a sleepy town and a lawyer from the city who stumbles in and never wants to leave. Or a street musician whose melody finally finds meaning in a passerby's smile. Whatever it is, we'll find it together. Because this channel, this space, it doesn't belong to just me. It belongs to us. Every comment, every message, every moment you spend here helps shape these stories. The way you rooted for Lena or smiled when Ethan found sleep again, that matters. Their journey proved that even the wildest, most tangled beginnings can still lead to something true. And I'm not done chasing those endings, not even close. So, if this story stirred something in you, if it felt like a whisper in your chest, like hope, then let's keep this going. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe, and let's keep building this community of hearts wide open. We'll dive into another love story soon. Another shot at healing. Another reason to believe. Until then, hold on to wonder. Keep believing in what you can't yet see, because the most beautiful things often arrive when we're not looking for them. Thanks for walking this road with me. You're incredible, and I'll see you in the next story.